and you begin to change, the world around you doesn't always applaud. In fact, the people who once felt confident in how you reacted, how you loved, how you sacrificed, how you gave and forgave without hesitation, they start to feel uneasy. Why? Because you're no longer the same. You're no longer dancing to the rhythm. You're no longer subscribing to the narrative about who you should be. And that shift, that quiet internal revolution, that's your greatest power. The moment you stopped operating from a place of emotional dependency, something sacred began to awaken within you. You started seeing with different eyes. You started speaking less and thinking more. You no longer gave your energy away to temporary people. And for him, the one who once knew your every move, this new version of you is terrifying. He remembers the old you, the one who always picked up the phone even when your heart was in pieces. The one who explained yourself endlessly, trying to make him see your value. The one who tolerated silence, disrespect, or absence because you believed love meant patience. That version of you, though strong in intention, was fragile in boundaries, but you've grown. You've rebuilt yourself from pain. You've stitched your wounds not with bitterness, but with wisdom. And in doing so, you've become someone he no longer knows how to reach. There was a time when your tears were his safety net, when he knew you'd eventually reach out no matter how far he pulled away. That time is gone, because now your silence speaks louder than your explanations ever did. Your calm demeanor is not indifference, it's clarity. You see, growth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's quiet. It's not posted online. It's not announced in emotional conversations. It's internal. It's in the way you think before you reply. It's in how you observe instead of reacting. It's in how you smile when someone tests your peace and you walk away without needing to prove a thing. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It took sleepless nights, painful realizations, and moments where you questioned everything about yourself. But through it all, you chose to evolve instead of revolve. You stopped spinning in circles of apology and over-explanation. You broke the cycle, and that shift unsettles him. Why? Because the version of you that he knew, he controlled, not through force, but through your own emotion. But this new you doesn't operate on emotion alone. You've aligned with a higher truth. You now understand that your energy is currency, and not everyone can afford your attention anymore. Now he's left confused, wondering why you don't chase, why you don't react, why you don't explain. He doesn't realize that you've found peace in your own solitude, that you've turned your focus inward. You no longer seek closure from others, you give it to yourself. That's the difference. You no longer allow outside voices to determine your inner value. You've created boundaries, not walls, but boundaries that protect your mind, your heart, your time. You've realized that not everyone who comes into your life is meant to stay. Some people are there to trigger your awakening. And that's exactly what he did. He activated your shift without even knowing it. The most powerful moment in your journey wasn't when you walked away. It was when you decided to stop walking in circles, when you stopped negotiating your worth, when you realized that your capacity to love deeply also required you to love yourself first. And the moment you began doing that, everything changed. You became less accessible, not because you're arrogant or distant, but because you've become selective. Your peace became your standard. And now anything that threatens that peace, you simply don't entertain. He senses it. He may not say it, but he feels it. That you're no longer emotionally available to be manipulated, that you no longer fear his absence because you've discovered presence within yourself. He's afraid not of losing you, but of the fact that you don't need him to feel complete. That's what shakes him to the core. He remembers the woman who used to wait, cry, and question her own worth. Now he sees a woman who walks with quiet confidence, who understands her value so deeply that she no longer needs external reminders. You didn't just change, you elevated. And elevation feels like rejection to those who are only connected to your lower self. You're no longer chasing understanding from someone who never intended to provide it. You're no longer begging for consistency from someone who benefited from your confusion. And you're certainly no longer participating in conversations that drain your spirit. That kind of change, it doesn't just disrupt relationships, it transforms your entire life. You're not angry, you're just done. You're not bitter, you're wise. You're not cold, you're clear. That's the power of transformation. And yes, it's scary for anyone who depended on your weakness to maintain control. You stepped into your power not by force, but by realization. And that kind of quiet strength is what shifts everything around you without needing to say a word. What he fears the most isn't your distance, it's your evolution. He fears the unfamiliar woman you're becoming, the one who no longer folds in the face of confusion, who no longer shrinks to make him comfortable. The moment you started growing, a silent alarm went off inside of him, not because you left, but because you're no longer recognizable to the version of himself that depended on your emotional softness. You've changed, and not in a loud or boastful way. You changed quietly, inwardly, in a way that doesn't require announcement but demands attention. He's afraid because he can no longer access you in the ways he once did. The emotional codes no longer work. The patterns he used to rely on no longer give him results. He's losing grip not of you, but of the role he once played in your life. There was a time when a text from him could shift your entire mood. A call in the middle of the night could pull you back in. A vague excuse could buy him another chance. But now, his usual tactics land with silence. His messages are read but not replied to with the same urgency. His efforts are met with stillness, not desperation. And this confuses him. Not because you're being cruel, but because you're being conscious. He's used to the reactive version of you, the version who over-explained, who cried on cue, who hoped he would finally understand your worth. That version of you was driven by fear. Fear of being abandoned, misunderstood, or unloved. But you've rewritten that story. You've upgraded from fear-based reactions to love-based standards. Now his confusion stems from not recognizing the emotional blueprint you operate from. He sees it in your posture, in your eyes, in the way you carry your silence like a sword. You're no longer anxious around his absence because you've realized your own presence is enough. He's unsettled because you stopped needing his validation. You stopped looking for meaning in his inconsistent actions. You stopped making excuses for his silence. That scares him more than anything. He didn't expect your healing to look like indifference. He didn't expect your closure to come from within. You've stopped circling back. And that's something he never prepared for. You are evolving. And your evolution is no longer happening on the emotional battlefield where he knew how to win. Growth creates distance. Not always physical, but energetic. The frequency you're now tuned into doesn't register the same old vibrations anymore. You're thinking deeper, walking lighter, moving slower, but with purpose. You're not proving yourself anymore. You're not fighting to be heard. You're no longer emotionally available to chaos disguised as passion. This scares him because it reflects his own stagnation. You're changing while he remains where you left him, emotionally underdeveloped and spiritually asleep. Your presence now highlights his emotional immaturity. He sees it, but he may not admit it. He may pretend like your distance doesn't matter, but internally, he's wrestling with the truth that he no longer holds space in your world. You're no longer tied to the illusion of potential. You've stopped romanticizing inconsistency. You've stopped waiting for him to get it. That power shift isn't subtle, it echoes. It vibrates through every word you don't say, every call you don't return, every invitation you politely decline. He's afraid because he doesn't know this version of you. He doesn't know how to reach her, how to influence her, how to anchor her back to where he once had control. But that's the thing. She doesn't live there anymore. She's moved on, not just in body, but in mind. And that's what he can't grasp. You didn't just detach, you elevated. And with that elevation came a recalibration of your entire value system. He used to be the center of your emotions, the pulse behind your reactions, the reason for your tears. Now he's just a lesson, important, yes, but not essential. And lessons aren't chased. They are learned, respected, and released. He sees that now. He sees that he doesn't affect your energy like before, that your days no longer orbit around whether or not he reaches out, that you're building something that has nothing to do with him. Your peace, your purpose, your identity, that realization cuts deeper than any silence ever could. He's afraid because deep down he knows you'll never return to who you were. That version of you, the one he was comfortable manipulating, the one who bent so she wouldn't break, that version is gone. And what replaced her is a woman who sees clearly, thinks critically, and moves intentionally. That's not someone he can play with. That's not someone who will sit quietly in emotional chaos. That's not someone he can dangle his attention in front of anymore. You become the storm he never saw coming, the calm one, the one that doesn't destroy everything outwardly, but reshapes everything internally. Your transformation isn't just a new phase, it's a complete shift. And that shift is permanent. He's scared not because you've changed, but because your change exposes everything he never became. There's a different kind of strength that comes with emotional detachment, and most people misunderstand it. It's not coldness, and it's not apathy. It's clarity. It's peace. It's control over your inner world in a way that makes your energy untouchable. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you don't feel anything. It means you don't let those feelings run your life anymore. You still have emotions, but they no longer have you. You've developed the discipline to sit with your pain, your confusion, your disappointment, and not let them dictate your next move. That kind of control is rare. And to someone who used to depend on your emotional vulnerability, it's intimidating. He was used to triggering your reactions. He knew what words would make you panic, what silences would make you chase, what inconsistencies would make you question your worth. He didn't need to say much because your emotions filled in the gaps for him. But that's not who you are anymore. You've built a fortress around your peace, not because you're guarded, but because you've learned, you've experienced what it feels like to be consumed by someone else's energy, to lose sleep over their distance, to question your own value based on their indecision. And now your emotional detachment is not a weapon, it's a boundary. It's you choosing your mental health over emotional chaos. It's you deciding that not every feeling needs a response, and not every interaction deserves your energy. This shift didn't happen overnight. It came after countless moments where you gave too much of yourself and received too little in return. It came after realizing that constantly proving your love was draining you. It came after recognizing that being emotionally available to someone who is emotionally unavailable was a form of self-betrayal. So now, you don't fight to be understood. You don't beg to be chosen. You don't chase anyone for clarity. Instead, you sit back and observe. You let people show you who they are without interrupting the process. And that scares him, because he no longer knows where he stands with you. There was a time when your silence meant you were hurt and waiting. Now your silence means you're at peace and moving forward. He can't manipulate your emotions anymore because you've withdrawn your emotional investment. You no longer need closure from him because you gave it to yourself. You no longer replay old conversations trying to find the mistake you made, because you finally understand that his behavior had everything to do with his own brokenness, not your worth. That understanding is what makes your detachment so powerful. It's not built on spite or revenge. It's built on awareness. He might still try to push your buttons to test if he still has a place in your heart. But the things that once triggered you now only teach you. You've rewired your mind to protect your heart. You no longer respond to every message. You no longer fall apart when someone walks away. You've stopped emotionally outsourcing your happiness. That scares him, because the person he once controlled with half effort can no longer be moved with a full apology. You've changed the equation. You've removed the power he had over your peace. And now he has no leverage. You've realized that emotional control is not about suppression, it's about direction. You still feel everything deeply, but now you decide what deserves to be felt and what needs to be released. You're no longer a prisoner to mood swings caused by someone else's inconsistency. You no longer confuse anxiety for love, silence for punishment, or attention for care. You see things clearly now. And that clarity has built a wall between you and every version of love that cost you your sanity. Your detachment is your protection, not from love, but from illusion. You're not afraid of loving deeply. You're afraid of losing yourself in people who don't know how to love at all. So now you observe more. You ask fewer questions. You let people speak through their actions, and you believe them the first time. He notices this shift. He notices how you don't argue anymore. You don't explain yourself. You don't try to fix what's clearly broken. You just detach and let it be. And that calm response, the one that doesn't beg, doesn't plead, doesn't chase, that's what shakes him to the core, because he knows the old you would have fought. The old you would have stayed up late, overthinking every word. The old you would have written long messages trying to make things right. But the new you, she turns inward, she lets go, she detaches, not because she stopped caring, but because she started choosing herself. That kind of power isn't loud, but it's undeniable. It's in the way you walk away without looking back. It's in the way you love yourself so much now that you won't allow anyone to love you halfway. He can't reach you like before, because your peace doesn't leave openings for chaos anymore. There was a time when the idea of losing him felt unbearable. You held on, not because he was giving you everything you needed, but because the thought of starting over felt heavier than staying stuck. You feared what life would look like without him. You feared the silence. You feared the absence. You feared the space that would open up when he wasn't filling it anymore. But over time, something shifted. Slowly, then all at once, you stopped fearing the idea of losing him and started fearing the loss of yourself. You realized that in trying so hard to hold on to him, you were letting go of the most important relationship you had, your relationship with yourself. That shift was the beginning of your healing, the foundation of your power. You started to see how much of yourself you had sacrificed to keep him comfortable. How many times you quieted your voice, silenced your needs, ignored your intuition, all in the name of love. You confused compromise with self-abandonment. You thought staying meant strength, but it was actually the fear of loneliness wrapped in romantic devotion. You gave more than you had, hoping it would be enough to make him stay. But no matter how much you gave, it never filled the void. You were pouring into someone who wasn't even holding the cup. Then came the breaking point. Not always a dramatic moment, but a quiet realization. Maybe it was a look he gave, a promise he broke, a pattern that repeated one too many times. Whatever it was, something inside you finally said no more. And not from anger, not from revenge, but from deep, sacred exhaustion. You were tired of showing up for someone who only remembered your worth when he felt your absence. You were tired of trying to explain feelings to someone who was never listening. You were tired of negotiating your value like it was something to be debated. That fatigue turned into awareness. That awareness turned into strength. And that strength turned into detachment. Now you're no longer afraid of losing him. Because the truth is, you never really had him. Not in the way you needed, not in the way your soul deserved. What you had was a cycle, a rhythm of highs and lows that became familiar but never truly fulfilling. And in breaking that cycle, you discovered something far more valuable than his presence. You discovered your worth. You learned that you can survive without the person you thought you couldn't live without. You learned that peace doesn't come from someone choosing you. It comes from you choosing yourself daily, relentlessly, unapologetically. He can feel the difference. He can feel that you no longer operate from the same fear that once kept you chasing. You're no longer looking for him to validate your beauty, your intelligence, your goodness. You've stopped waiting for him to realize what he had, because now you've realized what you were offering all along. You were the safe space. You were the emotional depth. You were the one who stayed solid in the face of his confusion. And that realization didn't make you arrogant. It made you free. Free from begging, from explaining, from overextending. Free from the emotional roller coaster that he mistook for passion. That when he pulls away, you don't follow. When he goes silent, you don't panic. When he returns with empty words, you don't entertain the illusion. You're not trying to fix anyone anymore. You're not trying to remind someone of your value. You're living it, breathing it, becoming it. And that kind of self-respect is rare. It's rare because it's not built overnight. It's built in the quiet moments, in the tears you cried alone, in the journal entries where you poured your heart out, in the nights you chose not to call, in the mornings you got up and kept going anyway. It was in the invisible work, the kind of work that others can't see, but you feel in your bones. You no longer fear losing him because you now know that real love doesn't require you to lose yourself. Real love is mutual. Real love shows up. Real love communicates, commits, and considers. What you were holding on to wasn't love. It was the potential for it. It was the dream of what could be if he changed, if he healed, if he finally understood. But you're done living in the future. You're living in the now. And in the now, you've chosen to stop investing in maybe and start investing in certainty, your own. He may come back not because he's changed, but because he feels the shift in you. He senses that you no longer need him. And that absence of emotional dependence will draw him in like gravity. But you'll see through it now. You'll see the difference between effort and manipulation, between growth and guilt, between love and emotional habit. Because you're different now. You're rooted, grounded, whole. He's no longer looking outside of yourself for something that was always meant to be built within. That version of you, the one who feared losing him, is gone. And in her place stands a woman who knows her worth so deeply, she no longer fears walking away from anything that makes her question it. He didn't lose you when you walked away. He didn't lose you when you stopped calling, texting, or checking in. He lost you the moment you reclaimed your mind, the moment you stopped letting your emotions override your logic, the moment you stopped assigning meaning to mixed signals. That's when he lost the version of you he relied on. The one who kept giving chances, who kept showing up even after being emotionally neglected. He didn't expect you to shift from confusion to clarity. He never anticipated that you'd outgrow your emotional dependency. He thought you'd always come back, always wait, always hope. But then something within you changed. You stopped begging for closure and created it yourself. You stopped blaming yourself for his inconsistency. You stopped making excuses for his lack of presence. And in doing so, you cut the emotional cord that gave him access to your power. It was never just about love. It was about control. As long as he had access to your mind, he didn't have to try. As long as you overthought every word, every silence, every vague answer, he had the upper hand. Not because he was stronger, but because you were still emotionally invested. But the moment you turned inward, the game changed. You no longer needed to know what he was thinking. You stopped waiting for a response that was never coming. You saw the pattern for what it was, a cycle designed to keep you emotionally stuck. And instead of feeding it, you broke it. You chose your sanity over a connection that drained you. You chose clarity over confusion. You chose peace over chaos. That decision didn't just shift the dynamic, it ended the illusion. When you reclaim your mind, you take back every piece of yourself you once gave away too freely. You stop needing someone else to complete your thoughts. You stop allowing their inconsistencies to live rent-free in your head. You begin to ask different questions, like why you stayed so long, why you tolerated so much, and why you were afraid to let go. You begin to see that you were never truly in a relationship. You were in a cycle of emotional highs and lows, addicted to potential, hoping he'd become who he promised to be, but he never did. And you finally understood that no one is worth losing yourself over. Not even someone you once loved. Now he feels the shift. He may not say it, but he senses it. He notices your silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It's not a waiting game anymore. It's not a strategy to get him back. It's genuine detachment. You've stopped talking about the pain because you've processed it. You've stopped checking his social media because you're no longer concerned with his story. You've stopped wondering if he misses you because whether he does or doesn't no longer controls your emotions. That mental freedom, that calm confidence, that unapologetic peace, it's what he never saw coming because he was counting on your confusion. He was betting on your emotional investment to keep the door open, but now that door is closed, and not out of spite, but out of wisdom. You've realized that when someone constantly makes you feel unsure, it's not love, it's control. And love should never leave you doubting your worth. You don't entertain people who make your mind race anymore. You crave calm. You seek clarity. You protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. And he no longer has a key to the space he once occupied. He might come back with the same words, the same charm, the same promises, But what he doesn't understand is that you're no longer the same. The emotional hooks he once used no longer sink into your heart. You've built a new operating system, one that detects manipulation early, that recognizes inconsistency without needing to justify it. You don't need to be convinced anymore. You observe, you listen, you trust the patterns more than the promises. And when they don't align, you walk, not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself more than staying in spaces that confuse you. This version of you is rare. She doesn't respond to breadcrumbs. She doesn't chase closure. She doesn't try to make people see her worth. She knows it. She lives it. She embodies it. And that makes her magnetic. Not in the desperate, needy way, but in the quiet, grounded way. You're no longer accessible through guilt, through manipulation, through the old familiar patterns. You've risen above them. And that terrifies him, not because he's lost you physically, but because he's lost access to the place he had the most control. Your mind. He can't predict you now. He can't read you. He doesn't know where to push because you've removed the buttons he used to press. You've upgraded mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And there's no version of him as he is now that fits into this new version of you. Negative feelings don't mean you're weak. They mean you're human. But the real transformation begins when you stop letting those feelings define who you are and start seeing them as signals instead of life sentences. They're messengers, not masters. They show up to teach you something, not to imprison you. For too long, you believed that feeling anxious meant you were broken, that feeling sad meant you were lost, that feeling angry meant you were out of control. But the truth is, emotions are energy in motion. They rise, they peak, and they pass, unless you feed them. What keeps them lingering is the story you attach to them. And when you change the story, you change the outcome. You used to let one message or the lack of one ruin your whole day. You used to replay conversations in your head, wondering what you could have said differently, how you could have prevented the distance. But now, you're learning to pause. You're learning to sit with the emotion and ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Maybe it's not about him at all. Maybe it's about your deeper need to feel safe, seen, and secure. And when you understand that, the anger turns into clarity, the sadness transforms into wisdom, the fear becomes direction. That's the power of inner work. You start managing your emotions instead of being managed by them. There were days you felt like your world was falling apart. When he walked away, when he stopped replying, when he dismissed your feelings like they were inconveniences. Those moments triggered something in you, not because of the act itself, but because of the emotional wounds it activated. Maybe it reminded you of rejection you felt as a child, of being unseen, of being told to be quiet when you needed to be comforted. And that's what negative feelings do. They dig up buried parts of us we never knew we had to heal. They aren't the enemy. They are the flashlight showing you where you're still carrying pain. When you stop running from them and instead face them with compassion, you start to reclaim pieces of yourself you didn't know were lost. You no longer suppress what you feel to keep others comfortable. You no longer label yourself as too emotional just because you feel things deeply. You now understand that sensitivity is not a curse. It's a compass. It tells you what matters to you. It tells you where your boundaries are. It tells you what you value and what you need to let go of, but it takes emotional discipline to use that compass properly. You have to train your mind to respond rather than react. That's the difference between living in pain and living with purpose. Responding means you choose your next move with awareness. Reacting means your pain is still calling the shots. You've come to realize that peace isn't found in avoiding emotions, it's found in processing them. Sitting down with your thoughts, even the ugly ones, and giving them space. Writing them out. Talking to yourself like you would to someone you love. Not judging yourself for crying. Not shaming yourself for still caring. Not pretending to be okay when you're not. But also not letting those emotions dictate your self-worth. You now know that feelings are temporary. Your identity is not your emotion. You can feel rejected without being worthless. You can feel hurt without being broken. You can feel lonely without being unloved. This is the kind of emotional mastery that creates unshakable confidence. And what's more, you've stopped needing other people to fix how you feel. That dependency is gone. You no longer look at his absence as a reason to fall apart. You see it as space to reconnect with yourself. You fill that silence with healing. You turn that loneliness into reflection. And slowly you begin to see that the pain didn't come to destroy you, it came to rebuild you. It came to strip away the parts of you that were still attached to illusion. It came to wake you up. And you answered the call. People think strength is about not feeling anything. But real strength is about feeling everything and still choosing to move forward. Still choosing to show up. Still choosing to be kind when you've been hurt. Still choosing to believe in yourself when no one else does. That's not weakness, that's power. And every time a negative feeling tries to pull you back into your old self, you pause. You breathe. You observe it not as a victim, but as a witness. And in that space, you find your freedom. This is the emotional maturity he never expected from you. The version of you that doesn't seek revenge, doesn't explode, doesn't collapse under pressure. The version that walks away with grace, with dignity, with peace. You no longer need to scream to be heard. You no longer need to explain to be understood. You know who you are. You know what you feel. And that's enough. That quiet confidence radiates. It speaks louder than any confrontation. It's the energy of someone who has walked through their own fire and emerged wiser, calmer, and stronger than ever.